Submitted for your approval. A busload of tourists on a road the travel agent never told them about. A road leading to the shadowy tip of nowhere. To the land of the different, the bizarre, the unexplainable. They thought they were headed for fun in the sun. Not quite.
Oh! Oh, yeah! God damn it, baby, no, I ain't laughing. I'm only gonna tell you one time. Oh God, I'm running. Whoa! Whoa!
All right, hi everyone. It's finally the return of Dystopian Book Club, presented by Dystopian Dance Party. That's Zach. That's who's talking now, and then Callie is the other person. And so
colloquially known as the drunk girl by my YouTube haters.
Yeah, and collectively we're two turds in a punch bowl. So the Dystopian Book Club, it's been a while since we've done this. It's not much to explain, but they're kind of like they're the closest thing that we've had to something that's like popular. Even though I think we get a lot of hate clicks, but so basically Callie and I we read like some kind of book. Usually so far it's been all autobiographies about musicians of some kind, although again so far it's been mostly hard rock musicians, and then we discuss it like a book club, and so we've done
except we're usually discussing like cocaine and poop.
Exactly, like a
shitting in shoes.
Like a much less dignified book club. This is the kind of book club that I would want to join. But it's probably you probably shouldn't have this kind of book club with your coworkers because you might get in trouble with HR. So you can have it with us instead. So we've read all 4 autobiographies by the original members of KISS. We've read Rick James, his 2 autobiographies. I always forget about that one. And so do apparently a lot of you, because it doesn't have as many views.
Which is weird because that one was, I think, probably our best one, like in terms of discourse.
Oh yeah.
And recording quality, because I think that was after I got a decent microphone. But like in terms of like discourse and like how it sounded and everything, like that was a really good podcast. Go listen to the Rick James one. You'll definitely learn something.
Exactly. Even if you don't like Rick James music. Because
we fucking hate KISS, and we read all 4 goddamn biographies. And we actually like Rick James.
Right. And
I didn't listen to their you did all the heavy lifting with that. I was like, I'll listen to whatever shit you send me that you think is worth listening to. I'm not listening to their whole discography. Life is too short to fucking do that.
Yeah, I can't say I regret it, but it's not like it's really paid off.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like how, I ran a half marathon. It's like, and now I don't work out ever. It's like I did something.
Your endurance to its absolute limits.
and I think David Lee Roth would be proud of that. Like we're endurance pushers. We read all 4 KISS biographies and listen to their worst music. Like that's an extreme sport in and of itself. I had someone today, my friends, described what I do as being a cultural historian, and I was like, well, that's a really, really nice way to put it.
Exactly. That's so flattering.
Yeah, I know. And I was like, I just know a ton of bullshit about heavy metal from the 80s. And she was like, no, you're a cultural historian. And I was like, all right, I'll take it.
So today we're talking about David Lee Roth's Crazy from the Heat. And this is a book, honestly, I'm surprised that we didn't get to this sooner.
Well, we've been talking about it for a year. I remember last year you texted me, we need to read David Lee Roth's book. And I was like, fuck yes, we do. Like, I definitely added it to my Amazon wish list. And I just, like, forgot about it. Because I have an Amazon wish list that's, like, stuff I want for Christmas and just stuff I'm going to buy myself. I don't differentiate.
Right.
So I didn't expect to receive it for Christmas for Mom, but I did. So I did, like, great. It was a wonderful gift.
And I, on the other hand, well, I guess first of all, yeah, it makes sense that I would have said around this time last year that we need to do Crazy from the Heat, because Van Halen is such a summer band. You know, I feel like every summer I end up listening to a lot of Van Halen, especially their first album, which is just a classic. I think it's one of the great rock debuts.
Yes.
So everyone listening to this now who's going to hear me say mean things about David Lee Roth, just keep in mind that I really love, especially their first record. It's just a great album to, you know, just like blast while you're speeding around the neighborhood in your Camaro or your regular car if you don't have a Camaro.
Or your Nissan Versa, as the case may be, which is what I was doing earlier, just blasting Panamas if I have a nice car. And like for me, like the summer like timeline in terms of what I'm listening to is like, I always, like, even before we started doing Jerry Curl June, which is another great podcast, listen to that.
Right.
I would always listen to what we call Jerry Curl music, and if you want an explanation on that, again, I refer you to our podcast and extensive writings on the subject. I always want to listen to Jerry Curl music in June, and then, like, as soon as July 1st hits, like, right before the 4th of July, which I don't even really celebrate, because fuck the 4th of July, but, like, it's still, like, it just brings out, like, the white trash in me. Like, the heat comes out, and I'm just like, all right, I'm wearing cutoffs and half shirts. I'm listening to fucking Van Halen for the next month or two. Like, I'm in here.
It is true. Since July 4th, I've been listening to, obviously, a lot of Van Halen, a fair amount of Grand Funk Railroad, some Seeger. Like, it really does. Like, it's a transformation that happens.
Yeah, like right from R&B straight. It's like, yeah, it's really like the two aspects of my personality too. Like the Jerry
Curl and mullet. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And that my hair is actually kind of a perfect melding of those two. So it works.
So yeah, we've been toying with this idea for a while. I actually had a hell of a time tracking down a copy of Crazy from the Heat. There is a, as far as I can tell, a nationwide Crazy from the Heat shortage. There's no new copies available on Amazon, at least last time that I checked. None in any of the libraries in the Metro DC area where I live. I've checked several large used bookstores. There were no copies. I would have thought that there would be whole shelves, just like it's bursting from the shelves, every possible edition. I ended up ordering a used copy off Amazon, and I got, I think it's a first edition. It's a very thick, heavy hardcover that makes the book look a lot classier than it is. I'll put it that way.
And actually, I wanna discuss the length. now that we're talking about how large the book is.
Right, yeah.
So, in my copy, I don't know if it's the same for you, but you open the cover, there's like the other two little like inside covers and a dedication. And then the next page is a thanks to his editor. And it reads, "A super ultra hyper special thanks to Paul Scanlon, who whittled this monster manuscript down from 1,200 pages to the gem you now hold in your hands. So this book is 359 pages.
But it could have been that long.
Right. Listen, like, when you start reading this, and I actually, like, saw a clip, it was because I've just been on a fucking David Lee Roth binge on YouTube. Like, it's all I've thought about. It's, like, I need, like, an exorcism at this point.
Yeah, one thing I just want to say is when we read these books, I just want everybody who's listening to know, when we read these books, it takes, like, a genuine psychological toll on us, because you hear... For 300, 400 pages, you hear that person in your head, and they don't leave. So Gene Simmons is still in my head. Paul Stanley is still in my head. David Lee Roth. It's like every new book we read.
Escape.
Rick James. It just adds to. It's like being in a mental institution, and you just hear
it's gonna make me schizophrenic.
It's just like gibbering in the other rooms. Like there's Diamond Dave. It's like hearing the ad libs from Running with the Devil running on a loop in your mind.
Yeah, but oh fuck, what was I saying? 359 pages.
I mean, it's too fucking long. Like,
basically, yeah, it's too fucking long.
It's too long.
End of story. Oh, I started out reading it, and I was like, well, you kind of said this too. Like,
right.
Oh, he's like he it's different. Like, I kind of, at first I appreciated how, like, everything's kind of out of order, and, like, the way he tells stories. Like, I've seen interviews with him before, and it reads like one of those interviews.
Right.
He even tells some of the same stories because he has, like, a set, like he has like a stock of one-liners and shit that he just tells. Like, that's just what he tells all the time. Like, I've watched multiple interviews where he's telling the same goddamn story. Basically, you won't learn anything new from this book because he's already told them a million times.
No, exactly. I found myself when I was about halfway through the book, and I've read it, actually. It's been kind of a little bit of a crash. I haven't given myself a lot of time to read this. It's basically 4th of July weekend was when I ordered it. It was waiting for me when I got home. I was in Michigan, and I came home the following week, and it was there, and I started reading it then. So it's been a little less than 2 weeks. We're recording this on the 15th. So it's been a lot, like a very high exposure, and so yeah, I kind of feel like reading this book is a little bit, I feel like now I know what it's like to know David Lee Roth, because it's like, at first, he's charming and entertaining, and it's like, oh, like what a raconteur, like, it's on his Wikipedia page, it says, the book helped to reinvent Roth's image as a popular wit and adventurer with a bon vivant personality. So it's like, that's how you feel at the beginning of the book. And then by the end of it, you want to kill him.
It becomes a chore. It becomes a chore.
So I know how Eddie Van Halen feels. I know how every woman he's been with, like, basically anybody who's been in a room with David Lee Roth, you have my sympathy, because I know how it felt.
When I first put on my Instagram story that I was reading this, I think it was JD from the Yacht Rock page. He was like, "You're gonna have fun with this because it's like being cornered at a party by him," and like, I was.
That should
I kind of expected that to be the case, but
that's on the book.
Right. That should be the main blurb. Is that you ever wanted to be cornered at a party by David Lee Roth? Well, here you go. Instead, the blurb is, at a time when so-called idols could only muster a few unintelligible words. ... I'm just gonna leave it at that,
because
there's
a lot of unintelligible words. I'll give him.
Yeah, like 359 motherfucking pages of it. Yeah, it's definitely more than a few.
Another gem from the Wikipedia page, and this is, by the way, after all of this, it says citation needed, so take this with a grain of salt. But it says the 359-page book was a selected collection of 1,200 pages of monologues which were recorded and transcribed by a Princeton University graduate who followed Roth around for almost a year.
Oh, yeah, I read
if that person is out here, and personally, I think that they committed suicide, but if that person is still alive and listening to this podcast, please get in touch, because I want to know what that experience was like. I mean, again, I kind of know what that experience was like, but...
Well, that would be Paul Scanlon, wouldn't it? Paul Scanlon, if you're listening, let us know.
Exactly. Yeah, are you okay? Do you need help? Is Dave with you right now? Do we need to send somebody to extract you?
He's still fucking talking to him.
Because that's the other thing. Like I've been watching some videos also, and it's dawned on me that I don't think David Lee Roth has stopped talking since 1978. I think the last 40 years has been just an uninterrupted monologue. And this book...
Yeah, and then occasionally they'll just bring an interviewer in. And just let him talk.
This book is just a tiny sliver of of that 40 years of one-sided discourse. But I love that it's cut down from 1,200 pages. It's a little like it reminds me of Jack Kerouac's On the Road. You know, originally he just typed up this huge, like, it was just like a scroll of on typewriter paper, you know, just like foot after foot of, you know, basically methamphetamine induced rambling, and then it got edited down into, you know, however many, like 200 pages of methamphetamine-induced rambling. And so, yeah, Crazy from the Heat, David Lee Roth is the Jack Kerouac of his times, is basically what I'm saying.
I'm just a gigolo, and everywhere I go, people know the part I'm playing. Pay for every dance, selling each romance. Ooh, what to say? There will come a day when youth will pass away. What will they say about me when the end comes? I've noticed we're just a gigolos. Life goes on without me. I'm just a gigolo, and everywhere I go, people know the part Dave's playing.
So, you know, normally we kind of go through these chronologically. That is not... It's not possible.
I actually don't. Some of the times, like, I didn't realize until after, when I did more research, like, what time period he was fucking talking about. Like, it will jump from, like, and I mean, part of this, I think, I can't remember if it's one of the blurbs or I read it somewhere else, but, like, somewhere, like, it might have been the fucking Wikipedia page, because if you want to know about David Lee Roth, just go to his Wikipedia page. There's no information in Crazy from the Heat. That's another thing. Like, good luck finding the truth in here.
That was when I was reading, I was about halfway through this book, and I found myself looking up something on Wikipedia, and I was like, I am literally reading a book about David Lee Roth right now. Why am I on? Like, why do I feel the need to look something up on Wikipedia? It's because there's no information in here. Like, if you need to know, like, dates or where something is or when it is or who else is there, you're going to need, like, extensive secondary source research.
But yeah, they said, like, one of the charms of this book is also its detriment, and that's that it's written, like, out of order. And he even says, like, something like, this isn't a chronological account because that's not how I remember it. And, like, we kind of touched on this before. Like, at first you kind of appreciate that, but it's hard to really, like, to really, like, follow what the fuck is going on. Like, that's my main problem with it. I feel like there could have been a way to do that and also make it so that you know, like, where you are in history. And some of the chapters, like, are okay with that, but then some of it, it's like, okay, now we're in the 90s. Now we're in the late 70s. Like, what the
Now
fuck?
we're back to Van Halen's first tour. Like, we really
Right.
another thing, and this is a complaint that we had about some of the Kiss books. I think especially Gene Simmons. There's no, like, you do not find out what happened in the studio in this book, except for we do get a little snapshot of the Van Halen reunion, and he talks about how he built a club in the studio and just like sat around while the rest of the band. Yeah, I believe there are 2 Club Daves constructed throughout the course of this book. One of them is in the bathroom of Studio 54, and one of them is in the studio while Van Halen are recording their reunion songs. And that's all we know about, like, it's not, which, I mean, I'm going to go on a limb and say that David Lee Roth was probably not a super hands-on guy in the songwriting process. Like, I feel like he probably wasn't there when, Eddie Van Halen was like hashing out a riff, or, Dave was probably in Club Dave that whole time. But
I think Club Dave is like his brain space too. He just like is in Club Dave, like constantly, like just. That's why he won't stop talking, because in his mind he's just got like bitches around him, and he's just like telling all the story. Like, he keeps telling the same story and over again because he thinks like there are different people in the club.
Yeah, Club Dave it's a whole lifestyle. It's a state of mind. We couldn't begin to understand what Club Dave is. So, but yeah, there's really, if you want to know like almost anything about, I mean, he talks a little bit about the music. He talks about, kind of how his songwriting changed after he like witnessed poverty in the third world. I guess it was. I'm going to be honest. Yankee Rose comes after that story. So
I don't, wait, what was the song? He said like he stopped writing songs, like one particular song. I can't remember what the fuck it was, but it's like I honestly can't think of one song that's different from
right.
Like, when did he write more like politically motivated music? Like, A Little Ain't Enough for Me? Like, is that it? Because that video has blackface in it, so.
Yeah, and then one of my favorite quotes, I'd actually read this before I read the book, was he called the music that Van Halen were working on before the breakup morose, which... like, I get what he's saying, because, especially some of the earlier albums, like, Fair Warning and stuff, there's a little bit of a darker tone in some of those records. But the music that Van Halen was working on right before Dave left was like Panama and Hot for Teacher. Like, I love to think about like what David Lee Roth considers morose. Like,
I wonder if it was like I'll Wait, which by the way is like I love that song. Yeah. But that, I mean, it has kind of like a sadder sound, like tone with the synthesizer. But isn't it about like wanting to fuck a porn star? Like, I don't know. I didn't do any research. That's what I got from it. Sounds like it. I did enough research. I basically lived with David Lee Roth for the last month.
Yeah, so
I was in Club Dave. I
trapped in Club. You were locked in Club Dave overnight after.
Not even overnight, for like a fucking month. I finally, like, I'm hoping that I'll get out after this podcast.
I am your picture, yes I know.
learn a lot of just like shoot from the hips political beliefs. He goes off on a couple
Oh my god. What chapter was that?
diatribes.
That it was like it like was out of nowhere. I remember I texted you about it. I was like, man, wait until you get to this
well, it's
chapter.
after
See, and that's okay, let's discuss this now because good luck finding anything in this fucking book. There is no index. The table of contents is just the chapter names, which are barely descriptive.
Yeah, basically, if you didn't take copious notes,
Which I did not,
or
I
like
never
flag
do.
every page or whatever, if you ever want to find something that you found in the book before, you pretty much have to skim through the whole thing again. Like, guess what? You're reading the book again, because God only knows when it comes up. But I think the chapter is the engine room.
Okay, here it is. Yep, it is the engine room. So the chapter is about him like experiencing anti-Semitism.
Right, which is interesting because he makes a good point in this book. He is Jewish, but I think the Lee throws people off. Like he does, like David Lee Roth. You don't necessarily, unless you really zero in on the Roth thing, you don't immediately go, oh, that guy's Jewish. And I mean, also like, he's such a like California surfer dude, which of course there are Jewish people who are California surfer dudes, but it goes against the grain of the stereotype,
Yeah, like Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley are the stereotype.
Exactly.
They're like New York
miserable.
Jews.
Yeah, and they're like specifically Jewish women. That is Gene and Paul. I'm gonna get in trouble for this, but.
Well, we're going to talk more about that, too.
But yeah, it's so, David Lee Roth, I think it's probably like one of the most famous Jewish musicians that people don't necessarily think of as Jewish. So, it's like the idea of a chapter of his book where he addresses, anti-Semitism and his Jewish identity is interesting.
It's interesting, and I think, he makes a lot of good points in this. Like, I really don't have a lot of qualms with anything he says, particularly about, his own personal experience, obviously, until, he gets to this, diatribe about who even knows what. Like, it kind of, unravels. Like, I think it's a strong chapter until, because he's talking about, people asked him things about they led with things about him being Jewish, and he's actually experienced anti-Semitism, so all that was valid. And then it just evolves into how he worked at a hospital, and he's talking about that, and talking about gun control, and just the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, which
he does not have a nuanced. If you're wondering if Diamond Dave has a nuanced take on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, the answer is no. He does not.
Yeah. And I mean, I can't speak on that. I personally, I'm not even gonna say what I feel about it. Because I'm not informed enough about it. I will just say that I have Palestinian friends, and I side with them. But
right.
And I also don't think that being anti-Israeli is being anti-Semitic.
Exactly.
But
I kind of think David Lee Roth might.
Yeah, and but at the same time, and this, this doesn't excuse it, but I can see where he would come to that conclusion, given his history and everything. I don't I'm not apologizing for him, but I do at least understand where he's coming from.
Well, he doesn't say anything. He doesn't say anything, I would say, necessarily super inflammatory.
Yeah.
It's more like you kind of. He says things that if you read between the lines, you're kind of like, oh wow, he probably has more fucked up opinions that he didn't share in the book,
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, he definitely talks about Israel as kind of, he says that part of the world was non-productive, non-fertile, unplannable,
false,
and that the Israelis cultivated it themselves, and so it's he has a very one-sided view of the whole conflict.
Yeah, and false
which
in those
certainly
cases.
yeah, which certainly in a from a 2018 perspective, you're kind of like. I don't know, Dave. Like,
yeah.
And then he goes off. He's talking about there's a Much Music interview where the guy is asking him about, or it's more like he thinks that he like reads the guy's mind and realizes that he's going to ask a question about EMI records.
First of all, let me just say, I don't know if I believe that this happened, because another thing about David Lee Roth's writing style and speaking style is that he makes up scenarios and characters in his head. So
that are not very plausible, right?
Yeah.
I was actually I wish I'd remembered. I was going to look on YouTube, because like you said, there's a wealth of DLR material on YouTube, and I was like, I wonder if they have this possibly apocryphal Much Music interview, because I would like to see how it really went down.
Yeah, I mean, if it really happened, then I apologize, but to me it just sounds, and maybe it did happen, but again, he wrote it in kind of like a character-esque way, but
right.
I don't know. It just seems like bullshit to me.
I feel like everything in this book is probably bullshit to some extent. Maybe I'm crazy, but I do not consider David Lee Roth to be a reliable narrator.
Yeah, this was my favorite part of this chapter, though, because after the entire chapter is how many pages? Five or maybe closer to 10 pages of anger, and a lot of it is justified, but this is my favorite. After all that, and he's describing the anti-Semitism he experienced, and people kind of discounting him as a dumb rock and roll guy, and then he says this: every step I took on that stage was smashing some Jew-hating lousy punk ever deeper into the deck. Every step. I jumped higher because I knew there was going to be more impact when I hit those boards. And if you were even vaguely anti-Semitic, you were under my wheels, motherfucker. That's where the lyrics came from. That's where the body language came from. That's where the humor came from. And where the fuck you came from. All equally as important. You want to know the ingredients? Don't ask if you want to know. I just love that because, I mean, first of all, I legitimately do love it. I just like the vitriol, honestly, and I think it's justified.
Yeah.
But what I also love about it is that he's talking about fucking crazy from the heat, or going crazy from
that was from
Eat 'em and Smile.
From Eat 'em and Smile, yeah.
Yeah. So what was were the Picasso brothers was that to stick it to anti-Semites? It's just abrasively annoying. He's gonna annoy the fuck out of anti-Semites.
Yeah, the anger is interesting because I was to, before reading this book, if you were to ask me how to describe David Lee Roth, use 5 adjectives to describe David Lee Roth, angry would not even come to mind remotely. He's the opposite of angry. But there's an interesting undercurrent, and he talks about it a couple times in this book of he and Eddie Van Halen don't get along basically from the minute they meet each other. There isn't something. There's that whole chapter about the anti-Semitism. There's whenever he talks about his music, there is he's kind of fueled to an extent by rage or by anger or whatever. But that's kind of where the self-knowledge and self-analysis ends. He says that he's angry. And he says that he doesn't really get along with people. He likes being alone. And then there's nothing beyond that. Everything else we know is what from watching David Lee Roth videos, which is that he likes to jump really high and kick his legs.
Yeah,
like
and be a goofball and say his one-liners. But honestly, like that part, like beginning with this chapter, that kind of like made him a more multidimensional person for me. And also like and kind of the other things you were talking about, like how he doesn't get along with people and how like he harnesses his rage into being like goofy and humorous. Like that honestly made me like relate to him, because I'm similar. Like I don't really get along with people. I don't really like hang out with people. I kind of do my own thing and use humor to cope with rage. So like honestly, like that's one of the good things about this book, and one of the few like truth-telling moments I think of it, because a lot of it is just like his one-liners and his anecdotes, and that was one part of the book that even though I don't necessarily agree with everything he said in the chapter, it made me like understand him more as a human being, so, and relate to him. So like there are some legitimately good parts of this book.
Yeah, and you know, it's before I read this book, I was honestly not sure if there was, you know, is there something behind the Diamond Dave character? You know, like he's so consistently so 24/7 in that role that it's like maybe that's just him. Maybe he's, you know, just like an empty shell of a person who loves to party like that, you know?
Yeah, what did you say? How did you describe him? Which actually, this is a good time to kind of go back to what we were saying about Kiss and how they're like no fun. Like obviously there's like rage and like more multidimensional feelings in David Lee Roth. Right. But he's mostly like fun. Like you said it was a lethal dose of fun. It's like too much fun.
It's like it's like it's more fun than any human being should ever have.
Yeah. Whereas the members of Kiss are, especially Gene and Paul.
Yeah, I know. Paul, especially his autobiography, like you just loathed him, but he was just like the whole thing was just whining. Yeah. And so I just, if there was some way, if we could like redistribute, like David Lee Roth's joy de vivre.
Yeah, he's hoarding it. Like
if
he's like Scrooge McDuck diving into coins, except it's fun. And Gene and Paul are like
they're like Scrooge. They don't have
right.
They're just like hoarding every tiny little scrap that they have. You know, they're sitting there eating gruel. So, in the kind of earlier parts of the book, you know, he's talking about kind of, it's mostly about his influences more than his experiences. He does talk about, you know, he went to an all boys school for a while, as you can imagine, was not very well behaved. He wasn't a model student. He talks a little bit about his upbringing, although he conveniently leaves out the fact that his dad was like hugely wealthy. He was like a celebrity, like a dentist for rich and famous people in Beverly Hills.
About that too is that when I was reading this, I said because I kept reading things out loud just because I could not fucking believe what I was reading, and Mom, because we were both at home at the time, Mom was like, wasn't his dad like really wealthy? Like, didn't he grow up with a lot of money? And I was like, I don't know. I don't think so. It's not in the book.
Yeah, nothing's in the fucking book.
I know. Like I later, like as I began to sense that pattern later, I'm like, oh, okay.
Right. He just leaves
why.
out the part that, again, according to Wikipedia, the real, the definitive source for David Lee Roth, his dad owned a 14,000 square foot home in Pasadena named Rothwood, as well as a chateau. The motherfucker had 2 houses, and we don't even we don't even know about it.
I mean, there's a little bit in that because he was the one with the PA system, and that's kind of what got him to be in. I love that he got into Van Halen because the Van Halen brothers needed his fucking PA system.
Yeah, they had to tolerate
the Dutch,
had to put up with
the Dutch
with
immigrants.
He does mention that his uncle, and this is actually true. Like at first, I was like, "Is this fucking true?" Like, because again, I don't trust anything that David Lee Roth says. But his uncle Manny is the guy who owned and opened Cafe Wah, a very famous venue. That's where Bob Dylan first started, or not where Bob Dylan first started playing, but Dylan played there, and it was where Jimi Hendrix first started playing. So. That's kind of an interesting slice of music history, and he touches on that a little bit, but mostly it's kind of like, here are the ingredients of David Lee Roth, and so there's George Reeves' Hercules movies. Okay,
Playboy.
That checks out. I thought it was interesting. He said he went to see a Marilyn Monroe movie. Marilyn Manson. He went to see a Marilyn Monroe movie, and Some Like It Hot, and I'm like, oh, I know where this is going. He's like, right then I determined that I was not only going to be Hercules, and I'm like, all right, Dave, yeah, we get it. You're gonna fuck Marilyn Monroe. That's what Gene Simmons would have said.
Yeah.
But he says, I was also going to be Marilyn Monroe.
I love that.
But then he just moves on. But
I don't know. I think that's saying enough, though. Like, I really enjoyed that part because it's like, first of all, he's spot on. Like, he literally that was him in the late 70s, early 80s, into the 90s, actually.
There is something.
Marilyn Monroe in Hercules. Like,
right.
And I also just love that, like, he mentioned that, and it's a very, like, non-binary view of gender to mention that, and then just moved along like it's not a big deal. I really appreciated that.
Yeah, there is something a little, like, not really femme about David Lee Roth, but definitely, his energy is, I think, a little more flirty than the average, hard rock guy, a little less like alpha male, especially
I'd
like you
say
said,
he's got
late
some
70s.
femme energy, like
I mean, definitely that Helmut Newton photo.
Yes. Yeah, I actually really I wish more art. I mean, I guess they all kind of did, but I guess I just related to them less because, like, Gene Simmons was like fucking Frankenstein and Godzilla and shit like that.
Right.
But I like that there was a chapter about, like, his, like, where he got his persona, because that's always interesting to me, is, like, seeing the elements of people's, like, character that they make themselves into.
Right, and it makes so much sense. Yeah, like Steve Reeves, Marilyn Monroe, Mad Magazine, Playboy Magazine.
Yeah,
it's like somebody you probably could guess all of these different components. The Beatles, who of course he describes as 4 black guys from London.
Wrong on both accounts. Yeah,
he's making some kind of point about, like,
he was
them
saying
being
that
transgressive.
He was like, they were black because they didn't have lapels. I was like, what the fuck are you talking about, bro? Like, I kind of get it because after reading this book, I can, like, kind of understand how he thinks, unfortunately. But, like, if you just read that quote, like, without having, like, out of context, it doesn't make any fucking
It's like
sense.
the ravings of a madman.
Yeah.
And he brings it up multiple times. He's like, there were no lapels, and then somehow that makes them black.
Yeah.
It's like you start thinking that maybe Paul Scanlon wasn't quite the amazing editor that Roth says he is.
Yeah.
Because if I was the editor, I would be like, what the hell are you talking about,
Well,
Dave?
honestly,
I would say that multiple times.
I think what the deal is with this is that it's like he had so much to just like carve off of the like just mountain of anecdotes that David Lee Roth tossed at him, that it's like it got to the point where it's like, oh, I just got to get this down to under 400 pages. Fuck it, I don't care what is left. I'm just throwing these in here.
And that explains a lot too. It explains why there's not really any content, because they cut it down to such a length that there aren't really any stories left in the in the book.
The first 359 pages that that he wrote down. Fuck it, that's the book. Get it out of here.
So we've mentioned Gene Simmons a couple of times. We should probably just briefly touch upon. He kind of makes a cameo appearance in this book, and it's not very flattering. There's not really much to say because again, it's just David Lee Roth does a drive-by and like on his way to the next whatever anecdote he wants to tell, but. He talks about the same story that Gene Simmons talks about in his book, where basically Kiss was having a hard time, Eddie Van Halen was having a hard time, for some reason, and Gene approached him to join Kiss, which is like, I mean, that would have been like out of the frying pan into hell. He dodged a huge bullet. That was probably what made Kiss what made Van Halen stay together for another 4 years, because Eddie saw he had a glimpse of the future that could be, and he was like, get me out of here.
Yeah, who would you rather be with, David Lee Roth or Paul Stanley? I don't care how annoying David Lee Roth is.
It'd have to be Dave, yeah, because Gene Simmons is just like a pill in general. That man seems like he has never had fun, even when he's doing what he loves and plowing women. I mean, I've seen his sex tape. It looks like a chore for everyone. It's the most dour sex tape I've ever seen. It's just sad. Paul Stanley is he's somebody that I think feels like he's David Lee Roth, but is wrong.
Yeah, he's like David Lee Roth, but calculated.
Yeah. Yeah, I would take Dave any day of the week. But anyway, so he tells the same story, and again, it's like these books always end up being like Rashomon, where it's like, who knows who to believe, because obviously Gene represents it as like, oh, I gave him this offer to get us both out of this bad situation. Dave represents it as Gene Simmons was trying to poach Eddie Van Halen and was really being shady and underhanded about it. My biases make me lean toward Dave's version.
Yeah.
but who knows?
Yeah. To me, that sounds more like something Gene would do. But
right.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't even want to get into it.
Probably the most content rich part of the book. He does go into a fair amount of detail about how Van Halen got together. And I think he's biased toward early Van Halen, which same. I don't blame him for that.
I mean, he definitely is. He says multiple times that he is Van Halen. He was the fun part of Van Halen.
Yeah.
And
he takes some good pot shots about the Sammy Hagar era for sure. Just sprinkled throughout the book. There's not any one section.
David Lee Roth is a messy bitch who lives for drama.
Yeah.
He is in this book, he shades a whole he talks some shit about Billy Squier out of nowhere. What did Billy Squier do? And I'm a Billy Squier fan, so I was like, damn, Dave, all right. Just I've seen I saw interviews with him back in the early 80s. There was one where he was on David Letterman, and he says some shit that's shady. I think he's it's basically I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was to the effect of there are some artists out here who do it this way or something, and he doesn't agree with that. You would think with the amount that I watched of his fucking videos, I would remember what the fuck he said. But anyway, but he won't disclose who he was talking about, and David Letterman keeps trying to get him to say it, and he's just we're just gonna have to move on to something else. In this book, he does not move on. He says names. He's out here talking shit about people.
Does not like Valerie Bertinelli.
He calls her fat.
he calls Eddie fat too.
I know. Yeah, he says something about how Eddie had gained some weight, and then he was like, "Or was that Valerie Bertinelli?" It's terrible.
We're not all climbing mountains and doing high kicks, Dave. Come on.
Right.
The chapter "What Made Classic Van Halen Tick." That's a good one because it has, a good one as far as the Van Hagar shade, because he talks about, and again, unreliable narrator, but he talks about the conflict, but also you can all through this book. Honestly, he really loved being in this band, even though he hated at least Eddie and Alex, and at least Eddie and Alex hated him, pretty much consistently from the moment that they started. But Dave is so he just loves early Van Halen so much.
Yeah, and same. I understand why. We were talking about this a little bit this morning, but early Van Halen, I'm not other than Van Halen 1, and even that has some tracks on it that I could do without Ice Cream Man.
Right.
Which is a very Dave production, by the way. So
yeah,
that was definitely his. I mean, he plays acoustic guitar on it. I learned that on Wikipedia and not from his book, by the way. But yeah, that's mostly good tracks, and then consistently every album has at least 2 songs that I really like. I'm not a huge fan of Van Halen albums as a whole, other than Van Halen 1, but early Van Halen has there's songs that were really good. Eventually we want to read Sammy Hagar's book and kind of compare notes, I guess, even though not everything will overlap, but
right.
I would like to kind of see how I feel about the Van Halen versus Van Hagar conflict after I've kind of read Sammy's account, and also because I'm reading that I would be listening to the music at the same time, because in the last couple of years more Van Hagar has grown on me. Not a lot, 2 extra songs, because he used to only be 2 and now it's 4, I think, songs that I like. But I think it'd be interesting that once we read that and kind of more accustomed to Van Hagar music, then we can take another poll, because right now we're both very strictly early Van Halen
Right,
fans.
right.
I don't think it
Yeah.
will change, but I'm open-minded. I'm willing to change my mind. I doubt it will, though. Because that's another thing, like, even though David Lee Roth is, like, annoying and kind of an asshole, like, he's my brand of annoying asshole. Like, I relate to him in many ways, and, like, he just seems more fun than a lot of other asshole rock stars. So
yeah, I will say, even after this book, even though I definitely needed, I need to detox from David Lee Roth.
So I shouldn't have been sending you like a million videos like every day.
I'll probably still watch them. Is the sad thing, but
You need to watch the one of him on Sway. That one was pretty good.
I still feel I still have some affection for him. It leaves you definitely like you want him to shut the fuck up, but you would maybe go get a drink with him again.
Yeah, he's like that friend that like you just need to have like a couple weeks break from, and then you'll return to. And one thing that I like kind of admire about him too is that like other than like really enjoying being in Van Halen and talking about it a lot, which I think that's valid too, because he like that was a group that he co-founded in a way. Like
right.
He doesn't really do too much looking back. Like he's constantly moving forward and doing new things to a certain extent. Like and like trying different things. Like he even stuck his hand in film, more of that later. But like even up till like the present day, like he's like getting more into martial arts, and like he stayed in Japan for a while, and like he's older now, but he's still like just now getting like full body Japanese tattoos and shit like that. Like he's just like constantly, like he's not being stagnant at any time. He's like constantly being adventurous. And that's kind of like inspiring, and yeah, like I commend him for that.
Probably one of the parts of the book that I like the most is when he very briefly talks about his solo career, and he was never really happy with it, which is fair because it wasn't great. He kind of, and he's very frank about like. After playing with Van Halen and after having this, chemistry that he is still like so clearly in love with, how do you get another band? Like you can't just put together, like you can get Steve Vai to play guitar for you, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have the same level of chemistry or the same, songwriting focus or anything, the same kind of excitement around it even. And yeah, so it's like he starts out a little more positive on his solo career, and then it's sort of like he's not happy with the results, and so he just like stops doing it. He just decides, I don't want to make albums anymore. And he hasn't in a while. I think the last album he recorded was the Van Halen reunion like 5 or 6 years ago. Finally got a whole album with them, but music doesn't really seem to be a priority for him. At least not in that sense. Like being a rock star, he kind of he could have kept hammering away at it, but he decided that he wanted to go climb in the Himalayas. Like I respect that,
Yeah, I like he clearly enjoys making music, because like I mean, and he put his all into the music he made. I feel like he definitely doesn't lack passion in it, but I do like that he's like willing to try different things and has other hobbies and likes that he's also passionate about, and like it like keeps exploring. That's like that was like, other than the fact that he's ungodly annoying, that was my main takeaway from this book, is that like he is just like passionate about a lot of things, and I think that's really inspiring, and that he's like not too old to do different things that are not necessarily like socially acceptable for older people.
Right.
I want to go back to talking about the film, though.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, first I want to talk about the music videos, because I think
which he doesn't. He really glosses over. Yeah, there is a good story about the California Girls video, where I guess he says that during the whole time that he was making that video, he was wearing ski goggles, like colored ski goggles on his over his eyes. That, you know, because the lens itself is colored, it obviously affects his ability to see colors. and
is
so
that why the cinematography is so bright or whatever?
That's what he says. Yeah, because he was still wearing it when they were editing it, and he was like, "I need more red." And rather than he keeps saying that nobody in the room told him, but it's also like he didn't have the fucking presence of mind to be like, oh, I can't see any colors right now. Maybe I should let me see if I can find this and read it, because it's a pretty good.
No, I love that part. I forgot about that in the onslaught of anecdotes that came after it.
It's just gonna be a bunch of silence while I flip through this whole fucking book.
Yeah, I wish the chapters had more descriptive anything. Like, yeah.
It's the super long hotel trashing chapter.
Oh my god. Can we talk about that for a second? I don't have much to say about the hotel trashing saga, but I will say that I was pissed off that there's very little information about anything, but
just fucking play-by-play.
Yeah, of how he trashed hotels, which, to be fair, like, a lot of it was funny and clever and everything, but it was like, come on. Like, I thought it was funny how, like, they would sneak into someone's room and super glue things to the ceiling in the exact same placement that it was on the floor. Like, it was funny.
That.
Yeah,
and he says that it's Dada, and it is. Like, that is actually it's like it's art.
Yeah, and I really appreciate pranks that are like that are just like silly things. Like, one of my favorite things to do personally is like hide things around the house that are funny for people to find. Like, I was doing that when Remy was home.
Right.
Remy thinks poops are hilarious because he's 5 years old, and I'm also 5 years old. So I like cut out some brown paper in the shape of poops, and me and Remy hid them around the house, and then people would find them. Like, I've always thought that was funny. So, like, I definitely appreciated that chapter for the first like 2 pages. It was when I got to like 14 pages. I might be exaggerating, but it was a lot. It was like a fucking prank manifesto.
It definitely felt like 14 pages, even if it wasn't.
Are we done yet? Like, I want to know about Van Halen. Like, why am I reading about these fucking pranks?
And then right after that chapter, we get the chapter where he gives his unsolicited opinion on the N-word. So it's sort of it's just a low it's a low patch. But here's the part about California Girls. So he says, what had happened is, during California Girls, I was wearing these, and this will give you kind of a feel for how David Lee Roth writes, because the cadence, like, after a while, the cadence just drives you nuts. What had happened is, during California Girls, I was wearing these glacier goggles, mirrored. They're round with leather side pieces. They look totally cool and intimidate everybody. First of all, I do not believe that for a second. And I wore them 24 hours a day. I would tell people it keeps the lighting the same, because I basically produced and directed the video. So, skip ahead a little bit. So I'm sitting in the back of the edit bay with my glacier goggles on. I've been up for 4 days and nights, and they go to color correct the blues. They say, "What do you think, boss?" I said, "I don't see any blue. Come on, you guys. Give me something a little more heterosexual." Nobody says to me, "Take your glacier goggles off." By then, it's an expected part of the front of my head. So they dial the blue right off the scale, like somebody nuked us. Now that's a blue. Okay, let's do reds. They correct, get everything balanced, and say, what do you think, Dave? I say, guys, you know how much this costs per hour, and I'll joke with you at the local cantina, but not here. Now let's do the fucking reds. Nobody thinks to say, Dave, take the goggles off. They redid dial everything. We did the entire color spectrum like this. I did not see the video till a month later when it shows up on MTV and it looks like somebody nuked the set. It looks like Chernobyl meets Chuck Jones. It's electrifying. Colors are bleeding everywhere. So much so that it's the norm. So it's not like I'm breaking format.
I will say too, like he I think at one point he like brags about how his videos are like the like ones from the 80s that you remember and are like still valid, and I think that's true.
He says the only ones, which is definitely that's not a stretch. Like I feel like Thriller probably has something to say.
Yeah, so it's not totally true, but he does have a point. Like especially like early MTV, some of those videos were garbage, but like the ones he directed or co-directed, like Hot for Teacher is still like a really good video.
Yeah, it's a classic.
California Girls is, it's like it's a David Lee Roth video.
Yeah,
like
and Just a Gigolo is still up there, and then they just they go downhill from there.
Yeah,
like it's like every
Just
one
a
is a little bit
last
shittier
one.
than the last.
Right. Yeah, because then the videos for Going Crazy and Yankee Rose use characters, or at least a character that was in Just a Gigolo, and that character should have. The
character is called David Lee Roth in a fat suit. Like that is the extent of the character.
No, that's not even the one that was in Just a Gigolo. It's his brother. One of the Picasso brothers.
Oh. Is that also David Lee Roth, or is that the other guy?
No, it's another guy. I don't know who the fuck it is. I don't remember what their names are either. But one half of the Picasso brothers, which I watched an interview of him talking about that, and he was like, it's like high art, and then they're brothers, which brings to mind like plumbers. So yeah,
this is definitely a case. Like the tacking furniture on the ceiling is. Okay, I can buy that as art. The Picasso brothers, you will never convince me that is art.
Never. Not even the makeup artist who made David Lee Roth look like a fat person. Yeah. Despite the guy, I sent you that video of the guy that like I think they planted him. So they were like interviewing people on the street. He's legally blind, I think. Yeah, they were interviewing people on the street. I guess I don't really know. But there is this one guy that they just like interviewed, and there was a snippet of it like in between David Lee Roth interviews. It was in some like compilation thing that I found, and he was saying like, I didn't even believe that was David Lee Roth, and he was talking about one of the Picasso brother character. Like it sounds like him. It looks like him. He's literally just in a fat suit. Like, David Lee Roth isn't fat. Who is that?
That same guy 10 years later was so confused by the Nutty Professor. He was like, I thought Eddie Murphy was in this movie. So here's the this is probably honestly another one that we should just read at length.
Is this a description of the movie?
Yeah.
Oh my god. This was my favorite part of the book. Like this. No contest.
A few words about the movie project. You do a video, you're visualizing a song. My best videos up until I did California Girls / Gigolo were live on stage. Jump is nothing but live on stage. Panama is essentially live on stage, with intercut karate and bungee cord tricks. And being Yankee Rose is live on stage. Yeah.
Being dragged out by police officers in a towel.
Giving a face, a visage to what you're hearing. And then he talks about acting and stuff like that. Just a Gigolo is simply walking around skewering the various factions of showbiz, of music business, myself included. When it was time to do a movie, part and parcel of the same, just longer, more deluxe production values, a bigger cast, but all picked up from the same patch. I shopped the movie around and landed it quickly because of the success of the videos. And then he goes into this weird, like, sidebar about how drunk people like to quote Yo Adrian from Rocky, and those same drunk people like to quote "Forget About It, Dave" from the opening of Just the Gigolo.
This.
You know, where he's like, "Forget about it." Like, first of all, this is not even.
I don't believe this.
It wouldn't even make my top 10 like most iconic parts of the Just a Gigolo video if I were making that list for some reason. The "Forget About It, Dave" would not. He'll say, I'll still get in an elevator and a complete stranger, 3 people behind me will say, "Forget about it, Dave." It's like, what? Like, there's no way. And then he says that he did a homecoming football game, was invited to be part of the halftime entertainment. As I come running out of the tunnel, a whole section of the stadium stood up, had to be 10,000 people, and yelled, "Forget about it, Dave." We were clearly already on movie turf.
I think about, my doctor told me I have to take a laxative more than I think about forget about it, Dave.
So whether these people are real or imagined, is being chased by people screaming quotes.
That's a figment of Club Dave.
Yeah. And he's like, "All right, we're on to something. Like, this is going to be as big as Yo Adrian." And so, but this is the movie. The idea for the movie was basically a musical with a very left of center plot. That is an understatement. There were a number of rewrites, but the general script for Crazy from the Heat was a story about Dave. And keep in mind, all of these characters are right out of California Girls. Dave has just finished a grueling tour around the world, shows up for a party at his evil manager Bernie Colan's house in Beverly Hills with his whole retinue. Like, just picture this in your mind and, like, imagine how racist it would be. His pimp road manager, Julius, the little Woody Allen assistant named Stu, and so on. I can only assume that it's like the other guys are like an Asian guy and a Mexican guy. Bernie has figured a plot to steal Dave's money, needs him to go on a vacation to accomplish this, needs him out of the country. We find a place on the map called the Dongo Islands. The whole team embarks on this vacation, and of course, it's your worst third world. The Jeep breaks down in cannibal country, but we escape and are rescued by Madame Duguay and her senile husband. They're royalty who live in deep South antebellum architecture on the other side of the island. Already, this is like bonkers. Like, can you imagine this? Like, how do you explain the plot of this movie to someone? You don't, which is why it was never made. Meanwhile, Dave's original managers, who Bernie Colan stole Dave from, are now broke, despondent, desperate to find a way to warn Dave because they're true blue. In order to make the money for the plane flights to the Dongo Islands, they sign up for a sleep experiment, a thing they see in the want ads. They go down to a clinic in the inner city. Of course, they can't sleep. So they go prowling around the building at night, and they stumble upon a meeting taking place in another room. A Japanese business cartel, ethnic stereotype number 3, is financing a series of successful underground experiments by a wild-eyed, delicensed scientist. The upshot of the experiment is they have found a way to isolate brain serum, and they're going to sell rhythm to white people. Of course, Bernie is involved in this, but there's some problem with crossing the races, so the brain serum... Stop right there. Crossing the races. So this is just a rollicking musical romp about eugenics. Like, no wonder Hollywood was so excited. Right. The brain serum has to come from a white guy with rhythm, and they can't think of anyone but Dave. So a scheme is developed to kidnap Dave and take his brain serum so they can begin to synthesize the product and make millions selling rhythm to white people. In order to get rid of the body, they're going to strap me on the ball that descends in Times Square on New Year's Eve, and I'll be crushed. And on and on and on. All of it, of course, taken from real life. I think he's being sarcastic there, but, you know, it's hard to tell. Yeah. So, like, this movie, like, it would have been
amazing.
It would have been amazing, and also the biggest disaster of the 1980s. Like, people would have talked about it the way that they talked about Under the Cherry Moon, which was not even,
but worse.
Yeah, like Under the Cherry Moon was not even that bad. Like, you can sort of give somebody an elevator pitch synopsis of Under the Cherry Moon. You know, it's about like a gigolo who falls in love with a woman that he's trying to scheme, but her dad shoots him. Like, there you go, elevator pitch.
Yeah, and spoiler.
Yeah,
but yeah, I don't know how to describe this movie to someone.
No, if David Lee Roth gave an elevator pitch of this movie to,
which I'm sure he did many a time.
Which I'm sure he did, and I'm sure that they were like, "Get me out of this elevator." This man is insane. But according to Dave, at least, it was going to get made. It was only because CBS was bought out. And he says that the entire album of Eat 'Em and Smile was designed to match up the scenes for the movie that never came to be. So if you want to get an idea of the quality of this film, watch the complete unedited video for Yankee Rose, and watch that interminable scene in the convenience store at the beginning. And just imagine that being like an hour and a half long. And there you go.
I can't believe it, okay? My honeymoon night, okay? I will probably only have 3 or 4 more of these in my whole entire lifetime. And you checked me into that dump your brother calls a motel.
But Consuelo, I gave him $2 extra for the fantasy suite.
Too bad, honey, too bad. I will not sleep there. So tonight, you will have to fantasize that you have a wife, okay?
Consuelo, mi amor. Consuelo. Can I help you? Ooh, breath mint. Our lips are so close.
Not if you was the last immigrant grocer on earth, honey.
Son of a brisky, my ancestors spit on your haircut.
Can you help me? I thought you said I have to take back to them.
Not in my store, you don't.
Ooh, my friend. I always hang out with 2 of them because it's better for conversation. See if there winds up being any. I don't have to be involved. Forget about it. Ooh. It's humid in here tonight, isn't it, girls?
Give me a bottle of anything and a glazed donut. To go.
There's toward the end of this chapter, he claims. He says that he was eating a lot of powdered donuts.
Oh my
during
god!
the
I love
making.
this that he has to like, we know that you were on cocaine when you wrote this movie. Like, you don't even have to say anything. Like, it's obvious.
I read that synopsis and I was like, well, this was definitely influenced by cocaine.
Right.
And then he's like trying to cover his ass, like, oh, powdered donuts, and they would leave the powder from the donuts out so it looked like they were snorting coke. But then literally the next chapter starts. There's an old science fiction movie from the 50s called Forbidden Planet where the extinct inhabitants are called the Krell. So we started to call cocaine Krell, gave it a science fiction name. And so it's like, who are you trying to fool here, Dave?
Right.
Like,
Right.
You're saying that you were doing coke in 1978, but not in 1985 when you had this fucking cockamamie idea for a movie that literally just sounded like you did a ton of rails and just like stayed up all night and wrote it in one spurt. He also doesn't really. They say that they would. When they did coke, they would have what they called the Krell Wars, but he doesn't explain what the Krell War is.
And I don't really want to know. Glad I don't.
Yeah, that is that's probably a blessing that we don't ever find out.
this is one of my favorite just anecdotes that's completely apropos of nothing. It would have made sense if he'd put it like at a different point in the book, but he doesn't. So this is sandwiched between him talking about Ozzy, like doing drugs with Ozzy and then Ozzy disappearing, Ozzy Osbourne,
Right.
And something about being in Tahiti in a beauty pageant where they're dancing to Ted Nugent. Anyway, he says, if you go anywhere where it's completely jungleness, you've got to take a big fat paperback. Something by James Clavell, Shogun or Taipan. Something like 600 pages long, or the complete works of Mark Twain. He fucking loves Mark Twain and mentions Mark Twain like a lot. And start reading 10 days in advance of the trip, because you're going to get the trots no matter what. You're going to get sick. You're going to get dysentery. You're going to be trying to cope with the trail, with the boat, the back of the truck, whatever it is that you're in. And you're going to be miserable. You're going to go driving into your pack to discover exactly what humidity and daily rainstorms have in common with that new biodegradable Earth Watch environmentally sensitive toilet tissue that you thought you had so carefully packed in that new Nalgene waterproof bag. Okay. I'm not even going to read the rest of the chapter, but I will say that, like, I had to take breaths because there's not proper punctuation for me to be able to take a breath. And, like, I think it is proper for his cadence, though. Like, I don't think that was poorly written. I think that's how he fucking wrote it.
No, he captured it. Yeah, I think he might have been eating powdered donuts when he wrote that.
Yeah, there's all types of powdered donuts.
And
again, goes on to tell another story that has nothing to do with having dysentery.
Nothing at all to do with wiping your ass on Shogun.
Yeah.
Which it took me a couple read-throughs to realize that that's like, I think maybe it's because my eyes were kind of glazing over and I was like sort of skimming. I got to the end of that and I was like, what? And then,
right.
I had to kind of like go back and piece it together, and it was like, oh, he's saying he's going to wipe his ass on the pages.
Yeah.
Like,
and then later on, he relates a story about how he got like, it might have been dysentery, some kind of like diarrhea disease, and he like almost died, and he had to be injected with this big needle of what the fuck ever, and
yeah,
in a hospital, and there was this person who was like drunk off of this some kind of like alcohol, and they were like thrashing around, and that was the chapter. There's absolutely no point.
Yeah, it's honestly it's sort of like, considering how much time is spent on things like the hotel room wrecking, it's almost like the travels could have been a much longer part of the book, because he's been to all these crazy places. He's like climbing in the Himalayas. He's going to all of these different countries and catching diseases, and he's like all over the place. But we got to find out about the behind the scenes of the Crazy from the Heat movie that didn't get made.
I am glad that I read more about that, because I've always been interested in that. Like, I really wish it had been made, honestly. Even if it had never been released and it was just a bootleg, like, I just want to see it. Because I'm a masochist and I love stupid shit like that.
It's not like his reputation would have suffered, it's I think Dave could have weathered that. It might have even made him more of a cult figure. Who knows?
Oh, here's David Lee Roth on blackface, something that he takes part in. I mean,
he definitely dabbled in.
Yeah, he dabbled. He didn't really wear blackface except for his offensive African stereotype in the Yankee Rose video. But
it's more like blueface.
Yeah. In this day and age, Al Jolson would be considered racist. The whole thing of putting on blackface, doing minstrelsy, I think that's the academic term. Singing Swanee River. I still know the words to all those. I imitated him. That's what I lip-synced to, Swanee. How I love you, my dear old Swanee. And singing in that black voice would be so politically incorrect now. And yet, I'm not even gonna touch it, because like with this, okay, whatever. Like I would argue that blackface was always inappropriate. First of all, number one. But okay, whatever. Like, that's fine. At least you're acknowledging that it's politically incorrect, whatever, like, nuanced way of saying that you mean. But this is the guy he had blackface in Just a Gigolo, blackface that caused the video to be banned in the A Little Ain't Enough for Me video, in which it's just like a crazy Dave stuff happening, and then out of the clear fucking blue, there's like a lineup of little people with blackface on. No reason. Like, that could have been edited out, and maybe the video wouldn't have been banned. And then this chapter like really made me realize that this is just something he's interested in, blackface. And I was like, all right, Dave, I see.
Yeah, so we get his opinions on blackface, we get his opinions on the N-word, the Israel-Palestine. He really doesn't shy from any hot button issues. Yeah,
I will say
he doesn't talk about like abortion rights or like gay marriage or anything like that. But yeah, he covers a lot of ground.
I mean, it's really only stuff that affects him. And I will say that his opinions on the N-word they're not as problematic as you would think. Like, right. I agree with what he's saying to a certain extent. I don't think he said it the right way.
Right. Well, yeah, it's sort of like it's kind of like a less articulate version of the famous Louis C.K. routine about the N-word.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, and the thing about David Lee Roth is I think he meant well. Like, I'm not excusing the blackface thing. That's always deplorable, but I don't think he's like a horrible racist. I just think he's complicit in white supremacy in a lot of ways.
Right. Right.
But yeah, like, apparently he changed his his songwriting when he saw starving people in other countries, though. So
yeah, and that's why we now have Panama.
Yeah, thank God.
At night I walk this stinking street past the crazies on my block, and I see the same old faces and I hear that same old talk, and I'm searching for the latest thing I break in this routine. I'm talking some new kicks, ones like you ain't never seen. This is home. This is Main Street. This is home.
The part where he's being stalked by that woman is pretty funny too.
I forgot about that. Yeah, where is that?
It's Fans in the Cult of the Spotlight. So
okay.
At first he's talking about how much he loves fans, and then he's like, but there are some like bad parts of having fans, and then he talks about this woman named Mrs. Lance who is like obsessed with him and stalks him, and he has to get a restraining order for her and all this stuff. My favorite part is when he just like mentions that he was hanging out with Pauly Shore, basically, like, and she comes up behind him and punches him in the shoulder blades and is like, "You son of a bitch, that's the last time you run off with your midgets to Rio de Janeiro and leave me with 4 black guys. What am I supposed to do with the children?" Like, where else would you read that sentence?
Right. And the best thing is, I don't think we're introduced to them at this point, but
I know.
But the midgets are like, David Lee Roth did have little people on his payroll that he would like dress up like security guards. Again, slightly problematic, but they're on the back of the book. You can see them. You can see he would just hang out and party with these guys.
Yeah. Yeah. The little people that he hires and calls midgets and like hires for comedic effect. I mean, at least they're getting paid, I guess. Like, it's
That's
not
true.
not that, that sounded worse than I meant it to sound, but what I was saying is, like, at least they're getting paid to hang out with David Lee Roth. Like, I would want to get paid.
There's worse ways, to make a living.
There's worse ways to hang out with David Lee Roth,
yeah,
aka
exactly.
for free.
Yeah, that's a good part. The part about The part about Helmut Newton is good, mostly because
it's good if you read the actual story of what happened.
Exactly. Like I would not have really found it remarkable at all. But again, it's that Rashomon thing. Like, if you believe Dave's side of it, it's like he's cultured, hangs out at Studio 54. It's like 1979, and he, super into Helmut Newton's photographs. He goes to the record label and is like, I want Helmut Newton to do, the cover for our next album. They say, there's no way, he's too expensive. So he tracks down Helmut Newton, charms him, because he's David Lee Roth. And Helmut is like, you know what? I'll cut you a deal. Let's go ahead and take the picture. Note that at no point does he bring up the rest of the band. Like, they're not even in the conversation at this point. So they go take this picture and everything's great. And he barely charges them anything. Helmut Newton's like, you're my favorite blonde. And they make the poster that ends up in the Women and Children First album. And, you would have just glossed over that, like, oh, that's just another anecdote in a book, full of hundreds of anecdotes. But I think, Callie, you found this and you sent it to me.
Yeah, well, I was looking up the picture because I went on Pinterest and I was like, I want to see what this picture looks like because I'd never seen it before. And then from there, Pinterest took me to an article that was the Helmut Newton picture that ruined Van Halen, split the band or something like that.
It's like somehow Dave left that out.
Yeah, he left it. Well, the rest of the group was mad, and for good reason, because it's a Van Halen album, and then you open it up and there's a poster of David Lee Roth chained to a fence, and that's
a giant poster of just him. Yeah, my favorite part of the real story, which I'll link on the blog, but the real story is they end up going with another photographer who specialize in taking photos of people of bands that hated each other and making it look like they were having fun. Like that was specifically why this guy was hired, the other photographer. That's a great part.
Another one of my favorite parts, just because of how it's sequenced, is there's a chapter, Rothing Your Room, which about how he has this thing he does where before a show he'll get on his hands and knees and clean the entire stage for some reason, and get on his hands and knees and clean the hotel room. That's a discipline thing that he does for himself, and it's called Rothing Your Room.
I think it's also he has rampant untreated ADHD, and
right?
he needs to do something to focus.
More importantly, now someone is going to come on this and comment about how we diagnosed him with ADHD.
He definitely does. This is not. I'm not pulling this out of my ass.
Yeah.
He will absolutely cop to this.
Yeah,
it's not
true.
It's not like what we said about Gene Simmons. Yeah. But anyway, continue.
Yeah, there's he's talking about that. Next chapter is called Hellfire, and it's about how he's taken to this bondage club and the things he sees in there, and how there are all these men in leather jock straps and stuff, and he goes into the bathroom and there's you pee into a bathtub, and then he looks in and there's a guy in the bathtub asking him to pee on him and shit like that. And then he's hanging out with Elle McPherson, who's in a Catwoman suit on Halloween, and he takes them to another bondage club. And keep in mind that this anecdote doesn't go anywhere. This is completely pointless. And how he convinces her to be a dominatrix to this guy, and she's just insulting him, and he's loving it or whatever. End of chapter. Next chapter is called Grandma Roth. The chapter starts, my Grandma Roth. My grandma Roth came to all our shows, and she wore Converse, and everybody liked her, and she got special placement at our shows. And like that's the fucking antidote. After describing how he's like peeing on people in the bondage bathroom, and Elle McPherson is in a Catwoman suit. Like, what the fuck? That was the point at which I was like, this is madness, and that's like that's not even halfway through.
That's not that far into the book.
Got me a date with a supermodel. I figured, fuck it. Dinner at the hotel, champagne bottle, steak and potato, a feather in a bucket. Tell me, what is it we're pretending not to know, and who needs proof? I don't need so much to remember. No, that's how it is when you tell the truth. How many times does somebody lie? Till patience runs a course. Keep that in mind when we say goodbye, 'cause you can't get this stuff no more.
I definitely want to talk about the chapter Reunion Blues. I think that was such a shot in the arm, because it was like,
well, it was after like interminable stories about mountain climbing and shit, which is like, at first it was interesting to read about his travels, but after a while, and after like the specific way that he writes relates stories, it just gets tiresome.
Right, and this is again, this is after page 300. Like we're done. Like we're ready for a break at this point. And he just got through like the chapter about his like Vegas show. We might want to talk about this.
That one's also
first,
good,
actually, because it's like this show just sounds insufferable. Like and the funny thing is that he's describing it like telling you how great it was, and you're like, oh my god, like shoot me. Like if I was somehow trapped in this room.
What is the dumb, he tells this like horrible rape joke and is like, I was stealing that from some other comedian, but he's kind of like, well, it gotcha. It was an old Rodney Dangerfield joke. And it's like, okay, well, first of all, you're not supposed to steal jokes from people. Second of all, the joke was not like he explained it, and it was like, what? Like, here it is. I played a little joke while the band played a detective theme. I said, yeah, I got busted for rape not long ago. I don't know if you're aware of that, but I got a good lawyer. I got Cochran and the boys. We pre-bargained it down to tailgating. They've got me doing civic service now. I'm working with kids. It's like, okay. What?
And then he goes, it's the kind of humor that makes you feel like you're inhaling fish bones. Accurate, I guess. You squirm, learn.
Yeah, the whole show sounds like you're inhaling fish bones.
You squirm, learn. What are we learning? Burn, churn, and laugh. My most favorite is kind.
Oh my god.
It just like, oh my god, it just sounds just miserable. So that's a disaster. But by the time I read this book, it's just like, or this chapter, I'm ready to leave Club Dave for good.
Yeah.
But Reunion Blues.
I'm like at the foyer, and he keeps fucking talking to me, and I'm like inching out of the door, like, all right, yeah. He's like cornering me at the door now.
Right. Reunion Blues, it was a big shot in the arm. Like, again, I'm gonna need a third party to verify this, because I have watched recently. I've watched the footage of the MTV Music Awards from 1996 when Van Halen all appeared on stage together. And while some of what he describes is very accurate, namely the rest of the band like slowly inching away from him while he's talking. What he doesn't really do justice to is how obnoxious he's being. Like he's got like Dave's version of it is like he kind of can tell the whole time that Eddie Van Halen is not, being upfront about whether he's actually back in the band or not. And, he's kind of being cagey but Dave like really wants to get the band back together because, he's the good guy. And so he kind of goes and they're all telling him to just like stick to the script and stuff, but he wants to like put them on the spot. And so he, they're like, don't say anything about the reunion. And he's like, well, they're going to ask about the reunion. And they're like, just don't say anything. Just stick to the script. And so then he, of course, talks about the reunion, which the way he describes in the book, it makes sense. But what you need to understand is that they're going out on stage to present an award. Like nobody's going to ask about the reunion because there's no question and answer. Like they're literally
they're all like, well, we're here to present this award. And he's like, wait, I just have to announce this. It's like, no, you don't.
Yeah. So he's like,
I have to address the elephant in the room. Like, just don't.
We all get it. Yeah. So you can see the band again inching away, and then like he doesn't talk about this at all, but he makes this joke at the MTV Awards that does not land. And I remembered watching this because I remember even at the time I was like, oh, like that's so stupid. Like, yeah. I remember being like third-hand embarrassed.
Have you noticed how things have changed a lot since the last time we were up here? Really? No, really. It used to be, I want my MTV. And now it's like, give me your MTV or I'll blow your head off, man.
Okay.
I don't even, yeah, because it makes no goddamn sense. What is he talking about? Michael Anthony looks like Hacksaw Jim Duggan.
Yeah.
David Lee Roth looks like the Babadook.
Oh my god, yeah. Like you said that, and I was like, oh yeah, I kind of like pictured the face, but what I didn't like his everything, the posture, the way he like has his hands straight down, his arms straight down, and his fingers like splayed out. And David Lee Roth we found other photos of him doing this pose. Yeah. Like this is something that he started doing in the 90s, just like standing stock still with a just like demented open-mouthed grin. Like I don't So yeah, David Lee Roth is the Babadook. I know that I'm going to regret this if it comes true, but I would actually like a sequel to this book because this book was it was written, not long after the kind of like botched reunion, and then Van Halen 3, the one album that they recorded with Gary Cherone on lead vocals, which if you think that we don't like Van Hagar, like I want to hear. And maybe we need some more distance because I think Van Halen I think the Roth lineup of Van Halen are still technically together. I want to know more about the reunion after the reunion because like specifically from Dave's perspective, because he really just like he comes to life when he's talking about this reunion and like
reunion stories are always the best because the best material from the Kiss books, which was like the same year too.
Yeah,
it was like 96.
So, like 96.
Yeah.
Like...
Oh man, that was the best material in the book. Like reunion stories from bands that hate each other are just golden, like comedy gold.
Yeah. there's a part where Eddie Van Halen is like screaming at him, saying he's gonna punch him in the balls.
Wait, we gotta read that because that part's good. Oh man, that was like my favorite. That was my favorite part.
Because Eddie Van Halen was really speaking for all of us at that moment.
Right.
Like we.
Oh, where the fuck is it? Oh, I love that part. I love that part where Eddie, according to Dave, I haven't seen the interview, but he just like mentions pretty much apropos of nothing that he needs hip surgery. He's like,
all right. Oh, here it is. Okay. I go home. So they go back in limos and like they drop Dave off without a word and like drive away. He says, I go home, there's a message on my answering machine at the hotel room from Edward. Hey man, we've got to fucking talk. This is bullshit, man. Da 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 da, on and on. Which I also like, just as a sidebar, I feel like that's probably when somebody is talking to David Lee Roth and it's not his own voice. It's like a dog. Like they just hear like noises.
Yeah.
This is a realistic portrayal. It's like the teacher from Charlie Brown. Da 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 da, on and on. Hey man, if you ever fucking talk to me like that again, I'm going to kick your fucking balls. I run into you, you better wear a cup. I'm going to kick you in your nuts. And then Dave says, let's just stop and consider this. The whole thing of balls, dicks, and nuts and kicking and slamming comes up again and again. What does that tell you? You've got a macho thing going here, to say the least. So judging from this passage, I guess Eddie Van Halen is like constantly threatening to kick or slam David Lee Roth in the genitals.
Oh man, yeah. And now like that chapter ends. The next chapter is a poem.
Yeah, there are multiple poems by David Lee Roth in this book.
Yeah, this was not perhaps the best placement right after that chapter, but it reads: "There is a statue of a Buddha in my driveway, rigid and stiff. That's where the birds shit, and he deserves it. Me, like a blade of grass, I bend profoundly. No raindrops on me. The wind blows around me."
That's like his like poetic reaction to the Van Halen
to getting
reunion.
To being threatened to be kicked in the nuts multiple times.
Just bends around it.
Well, basically, another thing that I would love to hear, because there are videos of the Dave and Sammy whatever the fuck monoliths of rock. There are videos of that because there was there's a documentary about it which I highly recommend. But man, just the way he describes this reunion tour, I would love to hear him describe that tour. Because the documentary is a lot of Sammy Hagar's point of view,
right? And
I just think that David Lee Roth is just like going to be funnier, and it's already funny, but
yeah, I think the Sammy Hagar book that we're going to read, it was definitely written after that
Roth and I hope that's
Hagar tour. So I'm sure that it'll be addressed. And that, again, that's another reason why Diamond Dave has to bless us with Crazy from the Heat too.
Yeah.
Maybe it could be called Eat 'em and Smile.
Yeah.
Like you can have that idea for free, Dave, if you want. Just thank me in the forward. That's all I ask.
Yeah. Give me.
Or let me write
dedication.
the forward. That would be even better.
Oh man, yeah.
Dedicate one to the ladies. Sometimes a babe needs something to keep you cool. Now sometimes a babe needs something to keep you cool. Better look out now, though. Dave's got something for you. Tell you what it is. I'm your ice cream man. Stop me when I'm passing by. Oh my, I'm your ice cream man. Stop me when I'm passing by. See now all my flavors are guaranteed to satisfy. Hold on a second, baby. I got frontman, banana, Dixie cups, all flavors and push-ups too. I'm your ice cream man, baby. Stop me when I'm passing by. See now all my flavors are guaranteed to satisfy. Hold on one more. Well, I'm usually passing by just about 11 o'clock. I never stop, I'm usually passing by just around 11 o'clock. And if you let me cool you one time, you'll be my regular stop. All right, boys. I'm putting my banana, Dixie cups, all flavors and push-ups to under ice cream man. Stop me when I'm bouncing by. See now all my flavors are guaranteed to satisfy. Yes, I'm your ice cream man. Stop me when I'm passing by. I'm your ice cream man.
So,
Stop me when I'm
I want to get to the. We got a really good question when we posted this video, and so I want to make sure that we can give it some attention. Is there anything else in the? I mean, there's so much.
Yeah,
like,
I mean, I don't think so. I think we covered everything I really wanted to talk about.
We could be talking for 5 hours because this book is impossible to summarize.
Yeah,
there are a lot of little like gems and nuggets. Some of which you can find on Wikipedia.
Yeah.
Like, again, probably a better resource, but, you know, like, he explains the whole brown M&Ms thing.
I mean, honestly,
I think this was the first time that he explained
No.
M&Ms.
It was not. Even remotely the first time. Like, that's the thing, is any anecdote that's in this book, except for maybe the reunion tour, just get on YouTube. It's there. You learn nothing new from this fucking book. He was explaining the brown M&Ms with the exact same language, everything back in 1981, and again in 83, and again in 85, like, and on and on. That story I heard, he uses a lot of the same one-liners over and over again. There's one that he inserts, like, I can't remember if this was in the book, but he for damn sure used it a lot in interviews where, like, he says something about how, like, when he dies, his gravestone will read, it's like, "Hey folks, have one on me. I told them I wasn't feeling well."
Yeah,
he uses
it's in
that
the book.
all. It is in the book? Okay.
I think it is.
It has to be, because that's one of his faves, for sure. He uses it a lot. Yeah, no, the brown M&Ms is...
Because it's like a... he's like a radio playlist. Like, he is just constantly spouting this monologue, and you know, you can tune in and tune out, but it's like he's just gonna keep saying it over and over again. And,
it doesn't
maybe
matter.
you'll catch it in 83, maybe you'll catch it in 98,
or maybe
you'll catch it in 2018.
Maybe you'll be like me and watch back-to-back David Lee Roth videos and hear it from all of those years.
Yeah, it's like when you listen to the radio for too long and you start hearing the same songs over and over
it's
again.
like, I'm sick of Boot Up and I'm sick of the blue brown M&Ms, so...
Yeah,
I did think, and I mean, I don't want to talk too much about this because I feel like the brown M&Ms thing has been talked about ad nauseum, clearly, but I do think it was interesting how that was seen as like a wild, like, rock and roll lifestyle, but it really was, at least according to David Lee Roth, that, like, they put that in their contract to make sure that the safety concerns were being read and understood by the venues. Like, that's interesting. I think that's a lot of, like, what he's trying to, like, explain in this book, is that kind of like almost a defensive thing, like, I'm not an idiot, like, this is why I do the things I do, and sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't.
Yeah, exactly. yeah one of the kind of interesting, I like when he, you know, we talked about Rothing, the room Rothing.
Yeah, the Rothing of the room.
He talks about how martial arts is like this, and, you know, again, this is a guy that I think very early in his life was diagnosed with attention deficit disorder. Like, he's been hyperactive, you know, his entire existence. He's constantly, like, jumping off of shit, and, you know, he's just like, he's very high energy, you know? But he talks about how martial arts kind of like balances him out, and he's actually, you know, really disciplined and focused when he's doing that. I thought that was interesting. It was also like it was a very self-important part of the book.
Yeah.
But it was again, like, it's interesting to see that other side that you don't necessarily see when he's like swinging on a harness with a boombox in the Panama video.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. And again, I think that adds like a different dimension to him. And you see that, like, I've watched, like, he had that Roth show that was like a web series, and like when he's not just talking interminably, like there was one episode where he's showing like different techniques with swords and things he's learned, and like I appreciate that he's knowledgeable about that kind of stuff and is good at it. Like, he's a student of that, and it's a discipline. Like, I wish I honestly, I said this on Twitter, but one of my takeaways from this book, like, I talk a lot of shit about it, but this book really like inspired me to like get in shape. And I mean, like, I'm not in bad shape, but like basically I want to know how to do a David Lee Roth jump. Yeah, that's it. Like, that's fitness goals, like splits and David
Lee Roth
Roth
did
jump.
it for our video, it's like you realize you were only human.
It.
Like,
yeah, I was like, this is not good enough. This is not up to my standards. And yeah, just like you know, get into shape, get into the kind of shape I want to be in, which is to be able to do the splits basically, and like be adventurous. Like, you're never too old to do the things you want. You're never too old or too annoying. And yeah, and like that too, like, just like because like I've said that I kind of relate to David Lee Roth in a lot of ways. Obviously I have like social anxiety, so I'm not as like insane as he is, and I like also have depression, so I'm not as high energy as he is. But like, you know, when I'm like with a lot of people and I'm feeling high energy, like last night I was at an art event, and in many ways I kind of like felt like David Lee Roth. First of all, because I was there shirtless with pasties on, and like when I'm in a schmoozing mode, I tend to get like really animated and tell dumb jokes and anecdotes and stuff, and to just be more like shameless about that, and just be like, this is who the fuck I am. I'm gonna tell the Brian Eminem story ad nauseum, and you're just gonna fucking listen to it. Right?
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. David Lee Roth has not changed one iota for anyone. Like, you have to you know, there's something about that I definitely admire.
I definitely appreciate that.
So let's get to we put out a call for questions and comments, and we got a really good one from Matt from Toronto.
Wait, let me just interrupt that I found a picture of David Lee Roth wearing a Toronto Maple Leafs jersey, which is our dad's favorite hockey team, and I thought that was pretty sweet. So if you're listening, David Lee Roth is apparently a Toronto Maple Leafs fan.
Yeah. So here's the letter. It says, Zach just finished Crazy from the Heat. The rich tapestry of insights into life from DLR will no doubt provide you and Callie with more than enough to discuss.
Jesus.
But circling back to the Gene and Paul reviews, I've been thinking about these guys as people versus the characters they portray. From your perspective, which autobiography provides the reader with a truer picture of the real Dave Roth, Stan Eisen, or Chaim Witz? I appreciate the use of their real names.
Right.
And which book does the author largely stay within their Diamond Dave, Paul Stanley, or Gene Simmons public persona? Secondly, which individual or persona do you come away from their books liking and disliking the most?
We kind of touched on this a little bit.
Yeah, we kind of, we just by accident, I guess, but it was a really good question. It's like a real ass like book club question.
Yeah, and it's a question. It's a question that's like, it's clearly like someone who's been listening to what we've been saying. Like, that's a very engaged. Like, I'm impressed that people are listening.
It's so heartening that.
Yeah, I know. Like, wow, we have fans. What? I'm so used to just being called two turds in a punch bowl and that drunk girl and like.
Exactly, or that they stopped listening after 2 minutes.
Yeah, you guys say too much. Like, we're from fucking Michigan. Fuck you.
And if Jeff Goldblum can build a 30 fucking year career with the amount of stammering that he does, then this is part of my brand.
Right. Everyone wants to suck Jeff Goldblum's dick, including me, but nobody wants to listen to our podcast. That's a totally valid connection to make.
But to answer the question, I guess we kind of danced around it a little bit just naturally in our conversation because we always feel the need to shit on Kiss, basically.
Yeah.
Because again, part of our brand. So just tackling the first question first, I would say that Paul Stanley's book was the least about his. It was the most kind of vulnerable, you know. Like it was like we kind of talked about this. The Gene Simmons book is very much like he shares some stuff about his early life, but he, you know, after a while, it's just like, oh, this is what you see is what you get. You know, he's not going to self-examine. He's not really going to dig past the surface. You know, he's. It's just kind of like Gene Simmons talking at you. You know. I feel like Paul Stanley, you kind of saw past the surface a little bit more, but didn't like what. I didn't like what I saw.
Yeah, which I mean is valid. You don't have to like what you see. What? So can you read the first part of the question again? I have no attention span.
So which autobiography provides the reader with a truer picture of the real David Roth, Stan Eisen, or Chaim Witz?
Okay, so it's the three of them. Like the three autobiographies.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I feel like David Lee Roth was pretty. In many ways, it wasn't insightful, but I think it was pretty truthful. I at least saw more of him. I don't know. Like, I agree with what you said about Gene Simmons. It was kind of just like, these are the facts, or what his version of the facts.
Well, Gene Simmons always feels like you're being lectured. Like, whenever he opens his mouth, it's like, oh God, here he goes.
Yeah.
You know, like.
And I guess, you know, like Paul Stanley did talk about like going to therapy and like bullying when he was younger. I don't know that. I mean like David Lee Roth and Paul Stanley kind of had different experiences, but I think that they were kind of both equally insightful in many ways. Maybe I'm wrong. There's some
interesting parallels. I mean, we talked about how they're both, you know, Jewish guys who kind of like struggled against the sort of the confines of, you know, Jewish masculinity as it was defined in the 60s and 70s, you know. Right.
Yeah. But I do think that like Paul Stanley obviously had a more difficult time because he had a disability and like was kind of more of like a nerdier kid than I think Dave was, for sure, because Dave is like gorgeous and like just more like outgoing than I imagine Paul Stanley was. So so I think that they were kind of both equally insightful about who they were, at least their images of themselves, but Paul Stanley just had a more like anxious like upbringing, I guess.
Right. Yeah.
For many reasons.
Yeah. Okay. So that's the first, and then which do you come away from their books liking and disliking the most? I mean,
this is a shoo-in.
Easy.
Yeah. I would like we already mentioned this. I would hang out with Dave before Gene and Paul any day of the fucking week.
Yeah. But the tough one though is like, which do we dislike more between Gene and Paul?
Gene.
It's Gene though, yeah. Like it's not even actually that tough.
It's because like Paul Stanley, I think he would at least be like fake nice. Like I don't think I would enjoy hanging out with him, but I don't think I would be repulsed like I would be Gene. Like Gene Simmons, especially like, as a woman, it doesn't matter like if he's attracted to me or not. Like I would fucking hate him. Like he is, like anything he had to say to me would just be repulsive.
Well, Gene Simmons really like gets off on being an asshole to people, you know? Like,
like that's his brand.
Because he's incredibly insecure and doesn't, you know, and has decided apparently never to deal with that and just to, you know, put up this really like holier than thou exterior and, you know, say things that just to get people's goat. And he's just an unpleasant person. And Paul is also unpleasant in a lot of ways, but Paul is he's an unpleasant that I can maybe deal with a little more.
Yeah,
you know,
like,
Paul is
like
like a
Paul,
huge bitch.
Right, like
and,
Paul
and,
is
and
an
I am
unpleasant.
also a huge bitch. So
right, like I'm somewhere between Paul and Dave. Like, so I kind of understand them to a certain extent because I'm like the midpoint between them.
Yeah.
Gene, I can't relate to at all.
Right. Yeah.
And I feel like
yeah.
Paul too is like a type of person that I have dealt with before, and you just like chill and just like let it happen.
Right.
Because he's not going to be a huge asshole to you. I don't think. He's
Yeah.
kind of more like PR trained, I feel like, than Gene
Right.
is. Or Gene is like a different kind of PR trained that is like not appealing to me at all.
Yeah, I'm fascinated. You know, I'm never going to stop talking about Paul Stanley and Gene Simmons because I'm fascinated by their relationship. Like,
Yeah.
they've basically been married for, you know, the last over 40 years.
Yeah.
Like almost 50 years.
I mean, it's kind of like if Van Halen had not broken up and brought Sammy in. It's
Yeah,
kind of like
like
if that
what-
relationship had persisted. throughout
Right.
their
Like,
whole
what if Eddie Van Halen
end.
and David Lee Roth had just like learned to live with each other, even though they don't like each other? Because Gene and Paul, like, transparently, they do not like each other.
Yeah.
It's sort of, it's like Mick Jagger and Keith Richards. They don't like each other, you know, but like they've made this decision that, oh, we're gonna
and
we're
I-
gonna stay together for the kids.
And I even feel
the
like-
Catman and the Spaceman.
I even feel like Mick and Keith like each other more than Gene and Paul do.
Yeah, so that's sad.
Yeah.
You know, that's actually a book that we could read sometime, is the Keith Richards. Like,
yeah,
I feel like that one is a
that
little
one was
more,
actually
like-
really good. I read that a couple years ago, and I've actually been thinking about reading it again. So this would be a perfect, like, it would give a point for me reading it again because I
Right.
just want to read again for pleasure. So it'd be nice to actually like talk about it. So
Right. I think the next book. Well, first of all, Matt, thank you for listening. Thank you for sending in the question. It's very incisive. You're invited to all of our, you know, book clubs to come. Like,
yeah, I love that he
you know,
read the
we'd
book
love
too.
Yeah,
like,
we'd
he
love
did
to
the
keep
fucking
hearing
work
from you.
and everything.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and if you have any other reactions to share after this comes out, you know, let us know. So yeah, I think the next book that we're reading, is this still the plan that we're going to do the Mark Bolan book?
Yeah, for September.
Okay. Yeah. So this is going to be our first biography, not autobiography. Mark Bolan did not write a memoir, which is probably good because I think his memoir would have been
Oh my
terrible.
god.
Been like fucking Lewis Carroll poem. But yeah, Callie, you've read this before. I have not. I've been similar. You know, I've been looking for an excuse to read it, and you know, we both love T-Rex and Bolan and glam rock, and I think it'll be a lot of fun. So, and this one, you know, if you're listening to this now and you're interested in reading along with us, you've got some time because it's not going to be until September. So you don't have to, you know, bulldoze through it like we did with Crazy from the Heat.
I will also say that it's a much easier read, and you might actually want to bulldoze through it. Like it's like well written. And makes sense. There's an actual narrative and a timeline.
I know the guy Mark Patras who wrote it. He writes for like Mojo magazine.
He's like a
and
Bolan
stuff.
scholar.
He's a good. He's a real good music writer. I like him a lot. So that's September. Next month, I think we're just going to do another kind of like freeform podcast.
Yeah, I
don't
think
really
we should
have a
catch up
theme.
on the shit we've been doing this summer. I do want to talk about how I saw Jethro Tull. I have some
Oh my
shit
God,
to talk
yeah.
about that.
Yeah, that'll be fun. We're going to. I also think that next month we're going to introduce a new, possibly a new recurring segment where we're going to read some erotic rock and roll fan fiction. Maybe we can start with the story about Dave and Eddie, since we just finished talking about.
But more importantly, we're releasing web content or YouTube content.
Oh yeah. So Callie's going to be in town. Those of you listening on YouTube, I know that it's that's most of our Dystopian Book Club listeners are on YouTube. Keep an eye out, because we're going to we've made some references to the comments that we get on YouTube, and I want to I've been wanting to kind of share them, because
they're amazing. Y'all are so creative.
Yeah. It's really
speaking of erotic literature, like
every couple weeks I get a YouTube comment, I'm just like, what is this? So yeah, we got some exciting stuff coming up. Of course, we still have our magazine on sale. The Prince Estate has not shut us down yet. Our magazine is all about Prince. It has art by Callie and by some other people. It has writing by me and by some other people, including Erica Peterson, who was on our podcast the other month, talking about it. If you haven't checked it out yet, check it out. I'm proud of it. I think it's really fun direction for us to go in. We need to start thinking about what the hell we're gonna do for the next issue.
Yeah.
So if you have any ideas about that, let us know. And you can find the magazine on blurb.com. Just search for Dystopian Dance Party. It is also, of course, linked from our website, which is dystopiandanceparty.com.
And if you're in the Detroit area, you can cop a copy of it at Detroit Threads in Hamtramck, Michigan.
Yes, people have apparently bought it. It's pretty cool. I'm pretty excited about that. You can also find us on social media. We're on Twitter at Dystopian Tweets. We're on Facebook just as Dystopian Dance Party. We're on Tumblr as also Dystopian Dance Party, and we're on Instagram now as Dystopian Gram, Dystopian Gram. You could also, I am on all of those things, but I feel like I'm the most active on Twitter, and the most I feel like that's my main social network. So you can find me on there at ZCHOSKINS, ZC Hoskins.
You can find me on Twitter at Nazpuller, NAZZPULLER. You can also find me on Instagram at Nazpuller. My Instagram is mostly like my art stuff, and Twitter is where I'm more pithy, I guess you could say. Although I get a lot of compliments on my story. People are like, they watch it and say it's funny. Apparently, I just shitpost all the time, so there's always content on both.
I thought for like 5 seconds about doing an Instagram story for Dystopian Dance Party, and I was like, I'm too fucking old for this. So like, if you want to follow us like that, then just follow Callie's Instagram. She has a more interesting life anyway.
Oh, kind of. I'm usually just in bed watching David Lee Roth videos,
but that's interesting.
Occasionally I'll have an art show, and you can see that. Like, I do some stuff. I occasionally leave the house.
Anyway, yeah, we got lots of good stuff coming up. So thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
She was a seaside sitting, just smoking and drinking on ringside, on top of the world, oh yeah. She had a drink in her hand, she had her toes in the sand, oh whoa, what a beautiful girl. To fool around. What a snappy little man, we're gonna keep him happy and accompany me to the ends of the earth. Ah, yeah. So I said, here I am, they know, man of the world, no. All I need is a beautiful girl. Ah, yeah, beautiful girls. Come on. Well, I'm a bum in the sun, and I'm having fun, and I know you know I got no special plans. got a maid in the shade, and all I need is the woman.
Understand? For the sweet talking honey with a little bit of money, she got your head around.
A bitch from the sea with the looks to me like she liked to fool around. Here I am, ain't no man of the world, no. All I need is a beautiful girl. Ah, yeah, beautiful girl. Oh, come this way, baby. Sit down right here. Ooh la la.